Imagine you have a job that is not only hard, but where you can choke on poop. Toxic gases, deadly dangers, up to your knees in poop. My name is Special Agent Anderson. Welcome to the world of medieval gong farmers. In medieval England, there were many professions that we can hardly imagine today. But one of the most extreme and dangerous jobs was that of the so-called gong farmer. This profession had nothing to do with farming, but was a term for those who were responsible for the disposal of human feces. At a time when there were no modern sewage systems, people's waste collected in latrines or cesspits, which were often built directly under or near houses. These pits had to be emptied regularly to prevent overflowing, stench, and the spread of disease. And this is where the gong farmers came in. The term gong was an old term for feces, and the gong farmers had the task of removing this waste with the simplest of means. Equipped with shovels, buckets, and, if they were lucky, some kind of breathing protection, which usually consisted of cloth soaked in vinegar, they descended into the pits to scoop out the contents. This usually took place at night so that the work remained as invisible as possible, and the population was not directly confronted with these unsightly and foul-smelling activities. But the job was not only disgusting, it was also life-threatening. Toxic gases such as methane and hydrogen sulfide, which could be fatal in high concentrations, collected in the narrow, stuffy pits. A single breath of these gases could cause a gong farmer to fall unconscious and plunge into the waste, where he would either suffocate or drown. There were no safety precautions, no modern equipment, and no protective measures. Anyone working in this profession was literally putting their life on the line. The physical strain was enormous. Shoveling for hours in the stifling darkness, lifting heavy buckets of feces and then loading the waste onto carts demanded everything from the workers. Added to this was the constant stench that permeated their clothes, skin, and even hair. Many gong farmers were plagued by skin diseases as they were constantly in contact with excrement, and the hygienic conditions made them susceptible to infections and parasites. Nevertheless, the profession was necessary to keep the medieval cities reasonably habitable. Without the work of the gong farmers, diseases such as the plague or cholera could have spread even faster, as the hygienic conditions were catastrophic anyway. Ironically, the pay for this work was not that bad. As no one took up this profession voluntarily, gong farmers were able to earn a comparatively good income that allowed them to feed their families. But money alone could not make up for the social ostracism. Gong farmers were on the fringes of society and were shunned by most people. They were considered unclean, and their work was seen as necessary. But at the same time, no one wanted anything to do with them. Even in their own communities, they were often isolated, and their clothes, which were permanently soaked in stench, often had to be kept outside their homes so that they didn't contaminate everything. The profession shaped their entire lives. It was not just a job, but a stigma that accompanied them day and night. Another problem was the logistical challenge of waste disposal. The contents of the pits had to be taken out of the cities as there were no sewage treatment plants. The waste was often taken to special fields where it was either buried or used as fertilizer. But the transportation was also laborious, and often another health hazard as the feces leaked or fell along the way, causing even more stench and pollution. The work of the gong farmers was therefore a never-ending chain of strain, danger, and social ostracism. There were even rules and regulations for this profession. Gong farmers were only allowed to work at night so as not to come into contact with the general population, and they had to complete their work within a certain time frame. Anyone who dared to dispose of waste in daylight or break the strict rules could risk severe penalties. Nevertheless, their work was essential as it helped to prevent complete chaos in the cities. At a time when hygiene was poorly understood and epidemics terrified people, gong farmers were an invisible but crucial force in keeping cities reasonably functional. With the introduction of modern sewage systems in the 19th century, the profession of gong farmer finally disappeared. The new technologies replaced manual labor, and the construction of sewer systems revolutionized the cities fundamentally. But the story of the gong farmers remains an impressive testimony to how people worked under the most extreme conditions to ensure the survival of the community. They carried out one of the most dangerous, dirty, and despised professions, and yet remained largely invisible because no one wanted to notice them. Today we remember them as one of the most unusual and tragic professions in history, whose work brought little glory but was invaluable to medieval society.